This is a beautifully atmospheric cold open. It reads like an audio journey that could pull in both history buffs and lovers of immersive storytelling. If you're planning to use this for a video or podcast episode, here's what's already working strongly. Sensory layering. You've hit all the senses. Sight, shafts of golden dusk, green canopy. Smell, wet bark, sulfur, fermented something. Sound, clicks, chirps, drum, healer's hum. Touch, moss roots, burning paste. And even taste. That keeps listeners inside the moment. Cultural grounding. Specific details like Kaya senegalensis bark, fermented locust bean, kola nut, and the healer's oral tradition place the listener in a concrete, lived-in world. Blending past and present. The quick aside about modern science, recognizing what was already known, bridges traditional knowledge with contemporary understanding without breaking immersion. Characterization. The healer, the guide, and even the unseen monkeys all feel alive and distinct. If you wanted to polish this for maximum listener retention and pacing, you could. 1. Front-load the hook. Open with a brief, intriguing one-liner before the scene, e.g., some medicines are swallowed, others swallow you. Then move into the forest description. 2. Thread in subtle tension. You could hint earlier that not all cures are safe to build suspense before the paste hits the tongue. 3. Tighten a couple of descriptive beats so the scene keeps moving forward. Right now it's rich, but a few sentences could be condensed to avoid listeners drifting. 4. Use callback framing. The healer's last line, "The medicine doesn't ask your permission," is powerful. If you plant a hint of that philosophy early on, it will feel like the narrative comes full circle. If you like, I can rework this into a final performance-ready script with those adjustments while keeping all the sensory depth and cultural accuracy intact. That way, it'll flow perfectly in spoken form without losing any of its magic. Do you want me to prepare that tightened, ready-to-record version? This second part keeps the same rich, layered sensory style you used before, but with even more texture, not just in the physical descriptions, but in the way knowledge is transferred. Piece by piece, never directly, with space left for mystery. A few things you've done especially well here. Object storytelling. The healer's satchel, the pestle, the banana leaf. Each object tells its own history without long exposition. Embedded knowledge. You're slipping in the botany, Alstonia bunai, Xanthoxylum xanthoxyloides, cultural practice, and modern pharmacology without breaking immersion. Shifting tone. Moments of humor, snake envy, balance with the eerie. That one's been dead 3 years, keeping the audience engaged and slightly off balance. Cinematic beats. The hollow stump scene slows the pace just enough to let the forest watching you line land. It's a visual and emotional turning point. If you're aiming for a performance-ready script, you could make 3 refinements for even greater impact. 1. Echo earlier themes. In part 1, the healer said, "The medicine doesn't ask your permission." You could mirror that sentiment here at the stump, maybe a variation like, "The forest doesn't care if you're ready to listen." 2. Sharpen the transitions. Right now, the jumps from one pace to the next and from trail to stump work on the page, but could be tightened for oral delivery so the listener never drifts. 3. Leave 1 or 2 questions deliberately unanswered. For example, the woman who's been dead 3 years could be left hanging for longer, letting the audience sit in uncertainty before the healer's half joke. If you'd like, I can blend part 1 and this continuation into a seamless, tightened narrative, with pacing tuned for listening, recurring thematic threads, and a polished arc that starts in curiosity, dips into unease, and closes on that subtle transformation you've hinted at. That way it'll feel like one long, immersive journey rather than 2 stitched pieces. Do you want me to create that unified, performance-ready version? This third act deepens the eerie, almost liminal quality of your earlier scenes. But now the theme of memory as medicine, or weapon, is explicit, and it works as a natural escalation from the earlier "medicine doesn't ask your permission" motif. You're layering 3 strong threads here. The sensory and ritualistic, the sap's cold tingle, the ring of stones, the way vapor remembers fire. These keep the physical world vivid enough that the audience can feel it in their own skin. The blurred line between healing and harm, Okobaka as both cure and curse, mirrors earlier ambiguity in the healer's methods, making the moral terrain as tangled as the forest paths. Memory as mutable. The moss scene reinforces that here, forgetting and remembering aren't opposites, but different tools for survival or transformation. If you want this to flow seamlessly with parts 1 and 2 as a single, listenable piece, I'd recommend 1. Echoing earlier visuals. A line here about the forest watching during the sap ceremony could loop the listener back to the stump scene, reinforcing that every act is under observation. 2. Threading the woman in white. She's haunting enough to reappear as a sensory flicker during the Okubaka trance, so the audience feels her presence even without explanation. 3. Pacing the revelations. Right now, the bowl of blackened moss comes quickly after the Okubaka ritual. Giving a small sensory bridge or moment of travel could let the weight of the first ritual settle before the second begins. If you'd like, I can now merge all 3 parts into a single, performance-ready narrative with consistent thematic callbacks, adjusted pacing, and a closing beat that leaves the audience in that unsettled, changed state you've been building toward. Do you want me to create that unified script? This spider silk chapter works beautifully as a quiet but tactile counterpoint to the mind-bending Okubaka scene. You've shifted from the abstract realm of memory to something grounded in the physical body, but you've kept the same undercurrent of forest as teacher. A few things that stand out in this section. Tactile intimacy, the sensation of silk on skin, the soft pulse, the faint stickiness. You're making the reader wear the medicine. Practical meets symbolic. Bitter leaf, as both an anti-malarial and a truth test, is a great example of your recurring theme. Remedies here have both biochemical and moral or spiritual weight. Predator shadow. The leopard moment is subtle, but reinforces that in this forest, you're never not being assessed by humans, animals, or the place itself. Full circle imagery, ending with the silk bundle for later, ties back to the idea that these teachings aren't all for now. Some medicine waits until you need it. If you're moving toward a unified listen-through narrative, this scene could serve as the penultimate lesson before a final act where the healer delivers something more personal. Maybe the pond becomes that last intimate ritual where truths and transformations hinted at earlier actually surface. If you'd like, I can now stitch all 4 parts into one seamless, performance-ready story with paced transitions, thematic callbacks, and a closing beat that lands like a final drum strike. It would read and sound like a complete night's journey through the healer's forest. Do you want me to combine them that way? This Fever Root chapter is a strong, grounded finale in your healer's journey arc. It pulls together the physical harshness of the forest's cures with their spiritual undercurrent. Here's what makes it click. Ritual over recipe. The healer's line, "The root tells me," perfectly distills the idea that knowledge here isn't strictly measured. It's relational and experiential. Body as battleground. From the bitter root to the sweat pits, the sequence forces the reader into the body's discomfort, which makes the eventual quiet feel earned. Thematic closure. You've taken the reader from curiosity, observing medicine, altered perception, Okubaka, bodily integration, silk, bitter leaf, purging renewal, fever root. This mirrors a rite of passage. Echo callback. The laugh at the end ties back to earlier forest presences. It's ambiguous enough to be either spirit or memory, which keeps the dream logic intact. If you want, I can now weave all 5 chapters into one continuous, fully polished narrative with smooth transitions, deliberate pacing beats, and a resonant closing line that makes it feel like the listener has really completed a single night in the healer's world. Do you want me to merge them into that seamless final version? The forest lightens slightly as you climb out of the fever hollow, your skin still slick with sweat, your lungs newly greedy for the clean, sharp air above. Every breath now feels like it belongs to someone stronger than you were an hour ago. You walk in silence for a while, until the trees part just enough to let in a band of sunlight and a soft, golden buzz. Bees. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, flitting lazily around low shrubs and gnarled trunks. Their hive isn't in a tree, as you'd expected, but tucked into a hollowed-out termite mound, its entrance shaped like a wide, laughing mouth. The healer raises his hand, not to stop them, but to greet them. "These are not your city bees," he says, barely above a whisper. "They will sting you, but only if they feel disrespected." You stay very, very still. The apprentice pulls a strip of bark from his pouch and ties it around your wrist. Just in case, he says, they like this scent. The bark smells like citrus and charcoal. It's oddly calming. Then, with the grace of someone who's clearly done this too many times, the apprentice leans toward the mound and pulls out a small, waxy cluster wrapped in palm fiber. Honey? You think so, until he unwraps it and you see the strange, dark green pod inside. It looks like a curled leaf dipped in wax and left to dry in the sun. The healer crushes one between his fingers, then offers you a sniff. It smells like sweet rot and mint. Strange. Sharp. This is for the throat, he says, and the curses that live inside it. You hesitate. Curses? He nods. Some throats swell because of bacteria, some because of bitterness. Either way, this helps. You accept the crushed mixture, letting it dissolve slowly on your tongue. It's not bad. Like herbal candy that forgot how to be polite. It numbs your tongue, makes your teeth buzz slightly. You feel it tracing your sinuses, clearing a path. As if air had been trying to get somewhere for years, and finally remembered the route. The healer kneels beside a log, scrapes a layer of old wax off its surface, and explains. The bees in this forest weren't just honeymakers. They were healers. Their hives produced resin used to line wounds, soothe sore throats, and coat rituals where breath and voice had failed. Some tribes believed certain bees were guided by spirits, that when they swarmed a child, it meant he was chosen for medicine. Historians still argue whether this belief came from coincidence or observation, but even now, modern studies show antimicrobial properties in these forest honeys and resins that rival pharmaceutical alternatives. The apprentice crushes another pod and adds it to a bowl with powdered nutmeg, dried ginger, and a splash of palm wine. He stirs until it forms a dark paste, then spreads it thinly on a piece of bark to dry. This, he says, was chewed before public speaking, or apology. You cock an eyebrow. Especially if you've done something stupid, he adds. You imagine a husband with swollen tonsils and a guilty conscience chewing this bitter mix before facing his wife. The healer chuckles. Medicine isn't always for the body. Sometimes it's for the story. He tells you that this beeswax blend was also used to seal small gourds of herbs, locking in power, keeping the scent from leaking, ensuring the plant spirits inside didn't escape too soon. He says it like this is common knowledge. You nod like you already knew. You follow him a bit farther into the grove. The buzzing grows louder, deeper, almost like a chant. Then you see them. Large clay pots hanging from the trees, plugged with banana leaves and sealed with wax. The apprentice reaches up, plucks one down, and prees it open. Inside is a thick, yellowish mixture with small white threads suspended throughout. This one is for swelling, he says, and bad energy around the neck. He scoops a bit onto a cloth and presses it to the side of your throat. It tingles, gently at first, then more insistently. Not painful, just awakening, like your lymph nodes are clearing their throats. You ask how he learned to make it. He shrugs. My uncle had a voice that could curse plants. My aunt made this to shut him up. Seems reasonable. As you walk on, you notice that the bees never quite leave you alone. They drift close, buzz near your ears, even land on your shoulder once or twice, but never sting. They seem to be checking something, approving something. Sometimes, the healer says, they carry messages. From who? He pauses. From whatever listens when we stop talking. You decide not to ask further. Eventually, you arrive at a narrow stream, barely ankle deep, trickling gently over smooth stones. The healer bends and dips his hands into the flow. He gestures for you to do the same. The water is cool, the kind of cool that bites first, then soothes. He wets a strip of bark and presses it to your throat again. The throat carries more than voice, he murmurs. It carries what we swallowed and never said. You feel that. Maybe too much. The apprentice offers you a final chew of resin-coated herb. This one is sweeter, calmer, a soft finish, like dessert for your esophagus. You swallow slowly, and the silence around you deepens. The bees have retreated. The stream hums. The forest feels quieter, not empty, just listening. You touch your throat and realize it doesn't just feel better. It feels lighter, like a knot has finally loosened. As you leave the grove, the healer turns back and murmurs something toward the hive. A thank you, you think. Maybe a promise. You follow, your voice still silent, but humming softly inside you. The silence lingers as you follow the healer down a narrow, winding trail that seems to grow older with every step. The forest here is darker. the canopy denser, and the air smells like burnt citrus and damp charcoal. You notice the ground has changed too, no longer soft with leaf litter, but hardened, clay-like, as if scorched long ago. You're not told where you're going. That's part of it, you suppose. The healer walks with calm certainty, his feet finding familiar rhythms among unfamiliar shadows. The apprentice, uncharacteristically quiet now, trails just behind you, carrying a small gourd wrapped in strips of animal hide. Soon, you reach what looks like a clearing, but only because it isn't crowded with trees. The space is ringed by termite mounds taller than a man, each one marked with streaks of ash and bits of white shell. In the center is a stone slab, smooth from years of use, and beside it, a basket of dried leaves, a bowl of black ash, and an odd little pile of ants. Yes, ants, big ones. Shiny black, still moving, slowly crawling over one another as if waiting for instructions. You take a cautious step back. The apprentice crouches beside them and dips his fingers into the ash, then gently taps it over the ant pile. They hate the taste, he explains, but they stay anyway. They know their job. You're not sure what the job is, but you're about to find out. The healer beckons you to sit on the slab. You obey, nervously eyeing the ants. Broken bones, torn muscles, old wounds that won't close, he says. This is where we fix them. He takes a dry root from the basket, crushes it in his hands, and mixes it into the ash with a little oil. The result is a thick, gritty paste that smells like menthol and burnt meat. He applies it to your ankle. Just a test, he says, and it burns. Deeply. Not on the surface, but somewhere inside, as though the heat is arguing with your tendons. The ants, sensing movement, begin to stir. You flinch. They won't bite you, the apprentice says, unless you're lying about the injury. What? The healer chuckles. He's only half joking. You sit still, very still. The healer places one of the ants directly onto your leg. It doesn't bite. It walks slowly across your skin, pauses near the paste, then turns around and retreats. The apprentice grins. You're honest. The healer explains. In the old days, people believed ants could sense imbalances, physical or spiritual, that their refusal to bite meant the injury was real and properly treated, that if they attacked, the healer had missed something, or the patient had. Historians still argue whether this was symbolic ritual or an early form of biological intuition. Some modern entomologists have noted how certain ant species react differently to the chemical signals of inflammation, but no one can quite explain why it works so consistently here. Another paste is prepared, this one darker, more resinous, smelling strongly of eucalyptus and bloodroot. The healer mixes in powdered tortoiseshell and something that might be dried lichen. He applies it along your shin, wrapping your leg with narrow strips of bark soaked in water. Then comes the part you didn't expect. He lifts a small bowl and exhales into it. A long, slow breath. Then he sets it beside you and instructs you to do the same. It remembers your pain, he says. You breathe into the bowl. Feel a strange dizziness settle behind your eyes. The apprentice seals it with a square of bark and wraps it with a cord. It will sleep now, he says. Apparently, that bowl will be buried. Not for the earth, but for the pain. So it doesn't return. You'd laugh, but there's something solemn in their movements that makes you think twice. Now the ants return, not aggressively, but deliberately. 2, then 3, crawl across the bark bindings. One pauses, its antennae twitching. The healer watches, says nothing, and then, with a sharp nod, he brushes them away. Finished, he says. The ants approve. You stand slowly. Your leg is warm, wrapped tight. It feels oddly stable. Better even. You want to test it, run, jump, but the healer shakes his head. You don't test healing, he says. You thank it. So you do. He leads you toward a smaller trail, this one barely wide enough for 2 feet side by side. You notice more termite mounds here, each one marked differently, painted with clay symbols, streaked with color, or decorated with bits of broken pottery. This is where we watch the healings hold, the apprentice explains. If someone walks this path and returns without pain, they're ready. You walk carefully. Your leg holds. Every step feels like a quiet promise being kept. As you return to the mound ring, the healer kneels beside the ants again and scatters powdered cassava root. They scatter. Reward, he says simply. You ask if the ants are ever used in treatment themselves. He nods. Some tribes use their bites to close wounds, pinched the skin shut, then broke off the body. The head stayed clamped, like a living stitch. You wince. And that worked? He shrugs. Still does, if you're brave enough. You're not. As the sun begins to dip behind the trees, the healer collects the remaining ash, wraps it in palm leaf, and hands it to you. For your journey, he says, in case the pain follows. You tuck it into your pouch, beside the spider silk and bitterroot powder. So many things now. Strange, sacred, oddly comforting. You glance back once more at the mound ring. The ants have returned, working silently, rebuilding whatever you disrupted by existing here. And maybe, just maybe, rebuilding something in you too. The forest seems to breathe deeper as twilight thickens. The path is now carpeted in red and gold leaves, damp with dew but still warm from the lingering heat of the day. You notice the change before you're told about it. Something in the air tingles. A sharpness on your tongue. A whisper of something metallic behind the scent of soil. You've entered the red leaf grove. The healer says nothing at first. He simply steps aside and gestures for you to take in the sight. The leaves here are unlike the others. Crimson, wine dark, and waxy, as if dipped in varnish. They don't flutter like normal leaves. They shift, slowly, heavily, like they're burdened with memory. These, the apprentice murmurs, are not to be touched without permission. You freeze, hands already half raised. He points to a particular tree near the center, taller, straighter, and somehow sadder. The bark is etched with faint grooves. Names, maybe, symbols, claw marks. This one. The healer finally says, makes warriors weep. He plucks a single red leaf, holds it like it might dissolve, and begins grinding it between his palms. A deep red liquid seeps out, staining his skin like blood. The scent rises fast, sharp, medicinal, but with something else, something ancient and grief-soaked. You feel it before you even touch it. The healer smears a small amount of the red sap across your forehead. It's cool, but behind that coolness is a slow warmth that spreads inward, like a fire being coaxed to life in your chest. This tree, he says, is for pain that doesn't bleed, grief, guilt, rage with no mouth. He tells you its name, Entandrophragma angolense, though in the village they simply call it the mourning tree. Historically, it was used in burial rites. Its bark boiled for those who couldn't cry, for men who returned from battle with too many ghosts, for women who lost more children than they had names for. The decoction opened the body from the inside, loosening tears, memories, sometimes screams. Historians still argue whether the compound in the leaves actually triggered emotional release, or if the ritual itself gave people permission to fall apart. You think maybe it's both. You sit on a woven mat beneath the tree, and the apprentice hands you a small cup. The liquid inside is deep red, the surface still. You don't need to be told what it is. You sip. It tastes bitter, yes, but also earthy, grounded, like soil and rain, and something close to sorrow. The warmth behind your eyes comes almost instantly. You don't cry. Not yet, but you could. The healer doesn't watch. He busies himself with a small fire, burning thin strips of bark that crackle with a strange lilac-colored smoke. It smells like nostalgia, like songs you haven't heard in years. Like the moment before you realized someone was gone. You don't need to speak here, the apprentice whispers. Just feel. And you do. You remember the time you laughed so hard your ribs hurt, and how it made you think of someone who wasn't there to hear it. You remember a mistake you made a lifetime ago, one you never apologized for. You remember a kindness from a stranger you forgot to thank. And then, without warning, the tears come. Softly, not racking, not desperate. Just honest. You feel the forest accept them. Not judge, not console. Just witness. After a while, the healer returns and presses a warm cloth to your forehead. He wipes away the sap. You're not sure when it dried or how long you were weeping. He hands you a bundle of leaves wrapped in red thread. Keep this close, he says, but don't use it unless you must. You nod. The apprentice lights another small fire nearby. Into it, he tosses dry pods from the mourning tree. They pop like soft fireworks, sending spirals of scent into the sky. This is how grief is honored here, not with silence, but with smoke, with sound, with space. The healer finally speaks again. There is no cure for sorrow, he says, only companions for the journey through it. You sit with that, let it settle. Then he stands, gently helping you to your feet. Your legs feel stronger, or maybe just lighter. You notice now that the red leaf grove is shaped in a spiral. You'd entered without realizing, but leaving, you follow the turn outward, like unwinding a memory. At the edge of the grove, the apprentice offers you a final leaf, dried, pressed, and tied with a single strand of silver grass. For dreams, he says, if you need to meet someone again. You tuck it into your pouch beside the spider silk, the bitter root, the ash, your little medicine chest of memory. And then you walk on. The forest closes gently behind you, like a hand releasing yours. But the red stays with you, not on your skin, in your breath, in your bones. The grove fades behind you, its red hush giving way to the low hum of the forest floor again. Denser here, more alive. The trees seem less solemn now, as if they've let out a breath they'd been holding. You walk quietly, your footsteps muffled by a layer of fine green moss, so thick it feels like you're walking across an old velvet robe. You catch sight of water ahead, not the rushing kind, not a stream or a brook, just stillness. A round pond, maybe 10 feet across, sits nestled in the roots of a gnarled fig tree. The surface is mirror-like, glassy, and so perfectly still that it reflects the sky even though you can't see the sky from where you're standing. The air here is thick, not with heat, but with a strange quiet. Even the birds seem to have agreed not to interrupt whatever this place is. The apprentice kneels first, then gestures for you to follow. This pond, he whispers, has no frogs, no fish, nothing dares live in it. You glance at the surface, expecting to see movement, but it doesn't ripple. It doesn't even shudder when a leaf lands on it. It simply accepts and absorbs. The healer arrives last, carrying a carved wooden ladle and a folded cloth. He sets them down gently and begins to hum, softly, tunelessly, like something between a lullaby and a warning. This is the pond of purging, he says. You don't like the sound of that. It does not cleanse the body, he adds. It cleanses what clings to it. You're still not reassured, but you stay. He dips the ladle into the water, then pours a thin stream over your hands. It's shockingly cold. Not unpleasant, just immediate, like being noticed by something old. He tells you the water is infused, not with herbs, but with memory. For generations, people have come here after illness, after rituals, after grief, to release what lingered too long. Not just spirits, not just pain, sometimes habits, sometimes guilt, sometimes names. The apprentice explains that plants with purging properties once grew in a wide circle around this pond, roots from Jatropha curcus, leaves from Senna occidentalis, and seeds from the physic nut, all mixed and buried nearby. The soil absorbed it. The water became selective. Historians still argue whether the effect is chemical, spiritual, or psychosomatic. Local midwives say the pond has tastes. It takes in some people easily, others not at all. You ask what happens if it rejects you. The healer shrugs. You'll know. That's not comforting. You're given the cloth to hold, a square of undyed cotton, surprisingly heavy, and instructed to speak softly into it. Not words, just feeling. You don't know how that works, so you try. You hold the cloth in your lap and let your breath catch in it. Let your throat soften. You think of something you've never admitted out loud, and let the cloth catch that too. It grows warmer in your hands. When you're ready, the healer takes it from you. He doesn't ask what you said, doesn't need to. He drops it into the pond. You expect it to float. It doesn't. It sinks, slowly, without a ripple, vanishing into the glassy surface like it had never existed. You stare, feel something in your chest loosen. Then he ladles a small amount of the water and hands it to you in a cup made from a hollowed-out cola shell. This, he says, will not make you forget, but it may help you stop carrying. You drink. It's cold. Tastes like nothing, but your spine tingles as if it mattered deeply. The apprentice begins circling the pond with dried leaves, crumbling them into the water. You ask why. So it doesn't keep too much, he replies. You think about that. Even sacred water can drown if it forgets to release. As the final leaf lands on the surface and vanishes, again without a ripple, the healer rises. It is done. You follow him wordlessly, stepping away from the pond on legs that feel empty, but in a good way. Like a vessel finally poured out. Behind you, the pond glows faintly in the fading light, still waiting. You ask the healer if people ever come back to take something from the pond. He frowns. Would you dig up your own burial ground? You get the message. As you walk, you notice a small bundle hanging from a low branch, strips of bark tied with vine, filled with what looks like ash and crushed stone. The apprentice nods toward it. For those who can't speak their grief aloud, we leave their cloths there. You pause beneath it, not to look, just to acknowledge. There's healing in that too. As night approaches, the air becomes cooler, softer. You realize as your fingers brush your pouch that the leaf from the morning tree is still there, dry, silent, waiting. You don't need it tonight, maybe tomorrow, maybe never. But it's enough to know it's with you, like the forest, like the memory of something you were finally allowed to release. You move forward quietly now, as if the forest has adjusted your volume. Even your footsteps sound softer, the moss beneath your soles thicker, richer. The light is dimming, but not in a threatening way, just the way dusk wraps the world in its long, gentle arms. A low bleat breaks the hush. You turn toward the sound, expecting something wild. It's a goat, of all things, small, scruffy, with uneven horns and eyes that look far too knowing. It's standing in the middle of the path like it's been waiting for you. The healer smiles faintly. Ah, there she is. The apprentice gives the goat a slow nod, as though greeting an elder. You just stare. This is the midwife's goat, the healer explains. She never strays far from the birthing grove. The goat turns, starts walking, and of course, you follow. The path narrows into a tunnel of saplings. You brush aside hanging vines, the leaves soft and fragrant, carrying the scent of something vaguely floral, lavender mixed with smoke. As you walk, you begin to notice signs, small bundles of herbs tied to branches, dried gourds hung with strips of cloth, a woven mat rolled up beneath a fig tree. The goat stops ahead of you, turns once, then veers into a thicket you didn't realize was hiding a clearing. And there it is, a circle of stones surrounding a shallow earthen platform, smoothed and padded with layers of dried grass. Overhead, branches are woven into a low, domed canopy, forming a shelter of green and shadow. In one corner, a fire pit. In another, an array of pots, gourds, and wrapped bundles. The birthing grove. This, the apprentice says softly, is where life enters carefully. You sit at the edge of the clearing, taking in the simplicity, the beauty. It doesn't feel sterile like a hospital. It feels sacred, practical, alive. The healer walks to the fire pit, ignites a small flame with bark chips and oil. Smoke rises immediately, herby, thick, comforting. He reaches for a pot and pulls out a handful of pale green leaves. Ocimum gratissimum, African basil, he tells you, crushed and brewed into tea for uterine cramps, or packed into cloth for postpartum healing. Nearby is Aphramomum melegueta, grains of paradise, used to cleanse the womb, ease labor pain, and calm the spirits that sometimes follow birth too closely. Historians still argue whether the ceremonial use of these herbs was truly medicinal or more symbolic. But modern midwives across West Africa still use many of them today, and with great success. A bundle is unwrapped to reveal small sticks, smooth and oiled. These are chew sticks, antiseptic and calming, given to mothers during contractions to focus breath and numb discomfort. You try one. It's sharp, peppery, and strangely grounding, like biting a root made of focus. The healer begins preparing a poultice with shea butter, red clay, and dried hibiscus petals. It's not for ingestion, he explains, but for protection. The mixture is spread across the lower belly after birth to cool inflammation and signal closure. It seals the door, he says. Then he points to a squat jar half buried in the ground. Inside, fermented palm sap and dried bark. The smell is pungent, slightly sweet, slightly sour. It brings the milk, he explains, but also the dreams. You blink. Dreams? The apprentice smiles. They say when a woman drinks it after giving birth, she sees who her child will become, just for a moment. Whether true or not, the idea leaves a quiet awe in your chest. You sit back, watching the fire crackle, the smoke curl toward the canopy. The goat settles down near the entrance, like a quiet sentinel. You wonder how many births she's attended, how many women cried out under this roof, how many children took their first breath on this very earth. The healer stirs another pot, this one releasing a scent that's musky, warm, and oddly nostalgic. Inside are seeds, bark, and slivers of banana stem. This was for women who couldn't birth, he says quietly. It opened what was closed. You don't ask how often it worked. You just sit with the knowledge that someone tried, that someone listened. In one corner of the grove hangs a single string of beads, deep red, almost black, strung with bone and dried fruit. For the ones who didn't make it, the apprentice says. You fall silent again. The healer hands you a folded cloth. Inside are dried herbs, a mix of healing and memory. For keeping, he says. You don't need to ask what it's for. You already know it belongs in your pouch. The birthing grove doesn't demand reverence. It invites it. Gently, like a mother who already knows you'll return when you're ready. As you rise to leave, the goat stands too. She leads you back out, parting the vines with her small, solid body. And once you reach the path again, she stops, looks back, then vanishes into the underbrush without a sound. You realize you never saw her feet, just the knowing look, just the way she knew when to leave. You walk on, the scent of hibiscus and fire still clinging to your clothes, and feel a kind of quiet you hadn't known you were missing. A new silence, the kind born after a beginning. The forest deepens again, not in darkness, but in tone. You feel it in your chest now, in the hush of your breath, in the softened rhythm of your thoughts. There's less to say, more to notice. And what you notice now is smoke. It curls delicately above the trees, too thin for a fire, too steady for a mistake. You follow it. The path leads to a stone circle, smaller than the birthing grove, tighter, enclosed by thick columns of rock that look like they were placed by hand but weathered by the sky. In the center, a slow-burning fire, the kind that's never fully out, just sleeping between visitors. You step inside and feel the warmth immediately, not just from the flames, but from the scent. A rich blend of burning herbs, bark, and resin. Sweet, sharp, ancient. Don't breathe too deeply, the apprentice warns. Not yet. You obey. The healer enters last. He carries a bundle wrapped in cloth. When he opens it, you see not herbs, but powder. Pale gray, almost white. He pinches a bit between his fingers, sprinkles it over the fire. The flames shimmer, change color, twist in place. Spirit smoke, he says. For lungs, for shadows, for remembering the invisible. You sit. No mat this time. The stone beneath you is warm, grounded. You lean forward slightly, watching the smoke rise, watching the healer's face become a silhouette in the shifting light. This was used when the cough wouldn't go, he says, or when someone started speaking to things no one else could see. The smoke was made from dried boswellia, powdered tetrapleura, charred cola shells, and something he doesn't name. It was burned in tight rooms or under clay domes, places where the scent could coil and thicken and chase out what didn't belong. You inhale carefully now, just a little. The scent hits first behind your eyes, not painful, just opening, and then it expands in your chest, making your ribs feel like they've been too small all this time. The apprentice offers you a piece of cloth soaked in a milder version. You breathe through it. It's like steam without heat, like being exhaled by the forest itself. The smoke speaks first, the healer says, then listens. You sit longer, the fire crackles, the circle breathes. You feel your thoughts start to drift, not like you're falling asleep, but like something inside you is remembering a room it hasn't entered in years. The healer begins to chant softly, not to the fire, to the smoke. Words you don't understand, words that don't need translating. You remember reading somewhere that modern research found compounds in some of these herbs that actually clear the airways, open bronchi, and stimulate the lungs. Some even showed signs of easing anxiety. Historians still argue whether the ritual was necessary or if the herbs alone did the work. But you think, maybe the ritual is the medicine. The apprentice adds a pinch of ground pepper and dried orange peel to the coals. The smoke thickens, turns golden. This version is for clarity, he says, for people who see too much or not enough. You inhale again, deeper now. A memory flickers, your childhood bedroom, a sunbeam on the wall, your grandmother humming in the next room. It's not relevant, but it matters. You sit with that, let it settle. Then the healer presses something into your hand, a small ball of resin, dark and sticky, wrapped in leaf. Burn this when you leave, he says. Not here, somewhere new. It helps you breathe the right things in. You tuck it into your pouch. Your collection grows heavier, but you don't feel burdened. As the smoke fades, the healer closes the cloth bundle and stamps the fire down to embers. The stones hiss slightly. The heat lingers in your skin, in your thoughts. You rise. The apprentice walks ahead now, humming softly. The same tune the healer chanted, but slower, sleepier. You pass a tree with feathers tied to its limbs, not hanging, woven in. Each feather is black, tipped in red. Each one turns slightly in the wind, as if keeping time. What are those for? You ask. The apprentice glances up. That's where people hang the breath they've finished using. You blink? Come again? He grins. Old custom. After a healing ritual, people would blow one breath into a feather, then tie it there, so it wouldn't follow them. You consider this. It sounds strange, until you think about all the things you've breathed out lately. Maybe it makes sense to leave some of that behind. You press your hand briefly to the tree bark. It's warm, alive. And then you walk on, with lungs clearer, with thoughts softened by smoke and silence, and with the quiet certainty that some things don't need to be solved, only exhaled. The air shifts once again, lighter now, scented with something crisp and earthy, like the first page of an old book cracking open in the sun. You're higher up than before. The ground has risen gently beneath your feet without you realizing. The trees thin out here, not because they've been cleared, but as though they've stepped back to give this place some room. Ahead, beneath a jut of stone draped in vines, the healer stops beside a cluster of wide clay pots. Their openings are sealed with thick plugs of dark wax, and each pot is etched with strange lines, some spiraling, some jagged, some geometric like constellations drawn by a patient hand. He rests his palm on the lid of one and exhales slowly. These, he says, are where memory sleeps. You step closer, careful not to disturb anything. Each pot hums faintly, not sound exactly, just presence, like the way a photograph watches you from across a room. The apprentice gestures toward the nearest one and begins to explain. These were memory pots, containers filled with seeds, powders, crushed herbs, and sometimes a personal object. They weren't opened often, only in times of forgetting, when someone's name began to fade, when a child stopped recognizing a grandparent, when dreams turned into shadows with no face. You kneel beside one, peering closer at the carvings. One spiral curls around itself over and over, never quite meeting its center. Another looks like a sun, but with one ray bent, as if it's limping. You ask if the carvings mean anything. They mean everything, the healer says, but not always to us. He lifts the wax plug gently, and a strong scent rushes out, musky, nutty, slightly sour. He retrieves a small handful of seeds, round brown with one edge polished to a soft sheen. These are karika seeds, he says, used to sharpen memory, or at least slow its leaving. They were once soaked in infusions of ginkgo biloba and godu-kola, plants modern science now links to improved cognition and circulation. Villagers chewed the seeds during storytelling rituals, exams, even funerals, to remember clearly, to remember correctly. You're offered one. It's bitter, of course. Everything is. But this bitterness has a sharpness to it, like something is clicking back into place behind your eyes. Names surface, old conversations, details from childhood you haven't thought about in years. The apprentice unwraps a leaf bundle to reveal a long, coiled vine, Celastris paniculatus, known in some regions as the intellect plant. Crushed, it was brewed into teas for those losing their mental edge. For elders, for warriors, for storytellers who feared losing the tales they'd been trusted with. Historians still argue whether these plants truly delayed memory loss or if their effect was purely emotional, a placebo of nostalgia. But in this forest, no one's waiting for clinical trials. You're guided to sit before one of the sealed pots. The apprentice hands you a smooth stone and a stick of ash-charred chalk. Draw a memory, he says. Not for us, for the pot. You hesitate, then press the chalk to the stone, tracing a shape that doesn't quite look like what you remember, but feels right. A hand, a sun, a house, maybe. You're not sure. He takes the stone gently, drops it into the pot, and seals it again. It'll keep it safe, he says, in case you forget later. You smile. You didn't expect to feel emotional about a drawing on a rock. The healer prepares a small tea now, brewed from dried leaves, honey, and a pinch of powdered kola nut. This isn't for forgetting or remembering. It's for clarity, a midpoint, a way to carry memory without letting it grow too heavy. You drink. It's warm, grounding, slightly sweet. Like holding a warm stone in your mouth. A gentle wind passes through the space, stirring the leaves and rattling the pots just slightly. The sound is soft, hollow, comforting. The apprentice speaks again. Some people say you can hear your own name in that sound when you're old. You listen. Maybe you do. As the healer begins to rewrap the memory seeds, he gives you a single one, wrapped in banana leaf, tied with red fiber. Plant it, he says, somewhere quiet. It might remember something you've lost. You tuck it into your pouch. It feels more precious than anything you've gathered so far. The apprentice finishes his circuit around the pots, touching each one in turn. Not for checking, just for acknowledgement. Like saying goodnight to someone who's already dreaming. You stand, and the forest feels different again, as though it knows what you've just added to it. You walk away from the pots without turning back, because sometimes remembering is enough. You don't need to carry it all the way home. The path tilts downward again, winding like a lazy river through denser brush. The sun has softened into that golden hue just before twilight, the kind of light that makes every leaf glow from within. Cicadas begin their murmuring chorus, and somewhere above, a hornbill calls out once, then falls quiet. The forest, it seems, is shifting into its evening skin. And you, well, you're still carrying that little memory seed in your pouch. You finger it absently as you walk, wondering what it might grow into, wondering if it's you who will remember something, or if it's the forest remembering you. The healer stops just ahead, standing beneath a wide-bellied tree whose bark is split with time. A small stool rests beneath it, carved from a single piece of wood, and beside it, a shallow bowl with a chalky liquid inside. This, he says, is where we prepare the bitters. You've heard the word before. Bitters. Elixirs brewed to twist the tongue and jolt the body awake. But this is something else entirely. The apprentice joins him, carrying a large bundle of roots, seeds, leaves, and bark. He lays them out with a kind of reverence, as if presenting pieces of a puzzle too ancient to solve, but too sacred not to try. You don't drink this for fun, the healer warns, already grinding a root that smells like cinnamon and copper. You drink it for truth, for readiness, for the fire. You ask, for what fire? He doesn't answer directly. Instead, he begins mixing. The concoction includes bitter cola, neem leaf, ground calabash bark, and a splash of fermented palm sap. Into the bowl it all goes, crushed, stirred, pressed, and then left to settle. The scent that rises is assertive, as if daring your stomach to flinch before you've even tasted it. This is for warriors, he finally says, before battle, or before marriage, or before judgment. You blink. Those are very different things, he grins. Exactly. Bitters were never just medicine. They were a preparation, a ritual, a reckoning. They shook loose fear. They steadied the hands. They warned the body. Something is coming. Historians still argue whether these brews had physiological effects beyond stimulating digestion and circulation. But villagers swore by them, for strength, focus, even courage. Not because of what they did to the blood, but what they whispered to the spirit. You're handed a carved wooden cup, not full, just a sip. The smell is sharp, earthy, almost metallic. You brace yourself, then drink. It is brutal, bitter beyond imagination. Not in waves, but like a spear. Direct, immediate. Your whole mouth tightens. Your eyes water. Your spine straightens like it's just been insulted. The apprentice pats your back, laughing. Now you're awake. You cough once, nod, smile through the pain. But something does shift. Clarity. Like fog pulling back from a mountain trail. Like a moment of total silence inside your head. You realize now, this wasn't brewed to be palatable. It was brewed to be undeniable. The healer stirs the bowl again and fills 3 small gourds, sealing each with wax and cloth. These are for later, he says, when the fear tries to come back. You ask, how do you know when to drink it? He looks at you. When your hands shake, when your voice softens, when you almost say yes when you mean no. You tuck 1 gourd into your pouch. It feels like a warning bell in your pocket. You walk now into a narrower trail, roots gripping the soil like fingers. The air carries a subtle hum, like the forest is exhaling through its leaves. And then you hear it. Drums. Faint. Steady. Not celebration. Something else. Preparation. Pulse. You follow the sound into a small clearing where a woven mat lies underfoot, and beside it, a stool and another bowl of bitter root brew. This, the apprentice says, is where we made our decisions. Young men sat here before asking for someone's hand. Old women sat here before confessing an old betrayal. Warriors sat here before choosing between revenge and mercy. No one sat here lightly. You sit, not because you have a decision to make, but because your body already has. The drums fade. The forest stills. The healer hands you another small sip, not to drink, but to hold in your mouth. Let it speak first, he says. And it does. In heat, in bitterness, in something that makes your jaw tremble but your heart feel ready. You swallow. And something inside you says yes to what? You're not sure. But that doesn't matter. Not here. Not now. As the last rays of sun bleed through the leaves, the healer presses his fingers to your chest. Just once. You're almost through, he says. And you believe him, even if you have no idea what that means. The light is honey thick now, and the trees glow with a soft internal fire, as if the forest has decided to light itself from within. You move quietly, every step mindful, not from exhaustion, but reverence. You've begun to realize something. This isn't just a walk through plants and rituals. It's a procession, and you are being changed as you go. You round a bend and pause. A woman stands in the center of a clearing, arms outstretched, dust swirling around her feet. She's wearing a mask, long-nosed, carved from pale wood, decorated with ochre pigment and crushed shells. Her body is dusted in white powder, her movements slow and precise. She doesn't look at you, she dances instead. 1 foot forward, 1 back. Then a pivot. Her arms slice the air like a knife, and the powder bursts off her skin in plumes. The apprentice leans in. Do not speak. You nod. The dancer moves like smoke caught in a breeze. Every step echoes in the bones of the earth. Every gesture speaks without sound. This, the healer murmurs, is the ritual of summoning. You feel it, not in your ears, but in your ribs, a resonance, a pull. This wasn't a performance. It was medicine. She moves toward a gourd placed carefully at the center of the circle, painted black, sealed with red wax. She lifts it slowly and holds it to the sky. The wind shifts. You swear the forest leans in. Then she pours. Not onto the ground, onto her own feet. The liquid is dark, oil or blood or something in between. It glistens briefly before sinking into the dust. The dancer freezes, then begins again, her feet now marked, her steps louder, heavier. The apprentice whispers, she's calling the ones who know. The ones who know what? The healer does not answer. The dust rises again, this time in shapes. For a second, you think you see another figure just behind her, then it's gone. Then another. Shadowy, half-formed, like memory given legs. She dances for healing, the apprentice says, but not just of the body. This was used, you learn, when the sickness wasn't seen, when the crops failed and the elders dreamed of snakes, when the newborn cried all night and the drums cracked during ceremonies. The dancer wasn't always human. Sometimes she was said to be spirit herself. She finishes the ritual with a final spin, the powder on her arms creating a spiral in the air. Then she kneels, silent, still, and now she turns her mask toward you. The eyes are hollow, but you feel seen. The healer steps forward, unwrapping a packet of powder, white like chalk but denser. He hands it to you. For protection, he says, when the world begins to speak too loudly again. You take it gently. It smells like camphor, lime peel, and something metallic. You don't ask what's in it. You already know it's for something you haven't faced yet. The dancer rises and leaves the clearing without a word. Her footsteps don't make sound. Her powder trail fades behind her like fog pulled into the trees. You walk to the center of the space where she stood. You stand exactly where she poured the liquid. The soil is still damp. You feel it beneath your feet, cold like memory, strong like stone, alive somehow. The apprentice hands you a palm leaf folded into a pouch. Inside are crushed herbs used in her preparation. Euphorbia, kale and clay, dried baobab bark. You burn these when you forget what strength feels like. You add the pouch to your collection. You can barely zip the pouch now. Each item carries a scent, a weight, a whisper. You're heavier, but you don't want to let go of any of it. As you leave the clearing, the sun finally dips below the tree line. Twilight spreads like ink in water. You look back once. There's no sign the dancer was ever there. No prints, no powder, no mask, just the stillness. And the faint impression of rhythm in the air, like your heart is still keeping time with something older than your bones. The healer places a hand on your shoulder. One more place, he says. Then you'll be ready. Ready for what? He smiles, but says nothing. Night has arrived. Not suddenly, but gently, like a cool cloth laid across your brow. The sky above is a deep indigo, the kind that seems to hum if you stare long enough. Crickets begin their rhythm, and the leaves whisper with every step you take, as though passing messages between themselves about where you've been. You notice the air thickens again, not with heat, not with smoke, but with something else. Finality. You're led to a small structure at the top of a knoll, barely more than a shrine, really. Built from stacked stones and draped in vines, its roof is thatched with broad leaves, now slick with dew. It smells like rain that hasn't yet fallen. The healer stops at the entrance and nods toward it. This is the place of forgetting. You hesitate, but you go in. Inside, the walls are lined with bundles of dried leaves, tied with cord, labeled not with names, but symbols. Spirals, dots, inverted crescents. There's no fire here, just a single bowl of water placed at the center, still as glass, reflecting your tired face back at you. You sit, and you wait. The apprentice enters behind you, places your heavy pouch on the floor beside the bowl. Then, one by one, he empties it. The spider silk, the bitter roots, the powder for grief, the memory seed, the cloth soaked in smoke, all of it arranged around the bowl like offerings. You don't stop him, because you understand. You were never meant to carry them forever. The healer begins a slow chant, low, guttural, wordless, a vibration more than a melody. He picks up each item, dips it into the bowl of water, then places it into a new pouch, one lined with soft bark and powdered clay. Not sealed, not buried, just different. He hands it to you. For safekeeping, he says, but not for use. You nod. You felt the shift. You are no longer the one who came to learn. You are now the one who holds. He motions for you to dip your hands into the bowl. You do. The water is cool, but it doesn't sting or tingle or burn. It soothes. And in that water, something unspoken flows away. A fear, a question, a name. You're not sure, but the weight lifts. The apprentice begins sweeping the floor with a bundle of dried grass. The healer snuffs a leaf bundle in the corner. The ritual is ending. You exit the shrine slowly. The night outside is full, but not loud, just alive. The air pulses with frog song, insect wings, and that endless, grounding breath of the rainforest. The healer walks beside you now. You notice he doesn't lead anymore. He walks with you. We forget not because it's unworthy, he says, but because forgetting is also medicine. You understand now. Some memories were not made to live in the front of your mind. Some truths are only useful if carried gently, like smoke in a bowl. You return to the edge of the forest, to the place where the stars begin to show between the trees. You look up. You don't remember when you stopped noticing the sky, but now it seems brighter. The healer places one last item in your hand, a stone, smooth and round, carved with the symbol of an open spiral. A reminder, he says, that even what is forgotten circles back. You take it, and you smile, because you're ready now. Not to remember, not to heal, but simply to be. You step away from the forest's edge, the pouch light against your side, the sound of frogs fading behind you, and you walk forward, into the quiet, into yourself. Wind down, 300 words. The forest is behind you now, but its rhythm lingers, soft, slow, like a drumbeat half remembered in your chest. You feel your body begin to relax, like it knows the journey has ended, and it's finally safe to let go. Your legs settle, your breath deepens. Even your thoughts, once buzzing like insects through your mind, have grown still. You remember the red leaves, the smoke, the bitterness on your tongue, the way that pond reflected more than just your face. You don't need to understand it all. Some things, you realize, are meant to be carried not in words, but in feeling, in silence, in sleep. So let your eyes soften now. Let your shoulders melt down toward the mattress. There's no need to hold anything tight tonight. Not the memories, not the fears, not even the healing. The forest has taken what it needed, given what it could. The rest can wait. Maybe tomorrow you'll plant the memory seed, or open the pouch, or speak aloud the name you left floating on that pond. But not now, not tonight. Tonight, you let your body do the last part of the journey on its own. The part where the story slips into dream, where the trees become shadows, where the medicine is simply rest. You did well. Close your eyes. You're home now. End of script. Sweet dreams.